In an age of skyrocketing divorce rates, is it really possible to make love last? Welcome to the Falling in Love Forever show with Doctors Barbara and Michael Grossman, the well-known relationship experts and best-selling authors of The Marriage Map book. Each week, they share the latest information to help you enjoy your romantic partnerships so you can fall in love forever. Here are your hosts, Doctors Barbara and Michael Grossman.
Hi, welcome. I'm Dr. Michael Grossman,
I'm Dr. Barbara Grossman.
and we're here to talk about creating loving romantic relationships. And my specialty is anti-aging medicine. I specialize in keeping people youthful and healthy in all different ways, with bioidentical hormones, with stem cells, with eating healthy, all kinds of nutritional approaches. And I love doing what I do. It's a lot of fun. I keep people healthy, both for their brain and their body, their sexual health, the physical endurance. All those things are a part of what we do in my medical practice. And then Dr. Barbara.
I'm an individual marriage and family therapist. I have my own practice, and Michael and I come together to do a relationship course called Falling in Love Forever, which is a 4-class series where we teach you skills on how to stay connected in a lifelong relationship, which it is inevitable to feel disconnected. And that brings us to our guest today.
So we have a special guest today in helping us to think out what we can do to create loving, fulfilling romantic partnerships and to eliminating the blocks to experiencing that. So Jennifer Hough, you are an individual who does things which are a little out of the ordinary.
I
And we'd
do.
like for you to share a little bit about what you do. You have a little discussion.
Like how you use physics to help people manage and develop their relationships. What does that mean?
Oh, well, let's see. This was not my foray. This was not my expertise, I can tell you. When I graduated university, I graduated from social psychology and accounting, if you can believe it. So, so I had to have something, and I was in no way interested in anything that the good doctor talked about, or like Dr. Michael, you talked about the whole idea of nutrition and all that. I had no idea. So I was pretty out of touch. I was trying to follow the rules of what society says you're supposed to follow in relationships and all of those things. So it's highly unusual for me to be speaking about physics, but something happened to me when I realized in my relationship, where I had the beautiful 6,000 square foot house with the indoor pool and a beautiful husband and, a dog and just everything you could ever imagine. And my husband loved me very much, but it wasn't enough. And one night when I was particularly this explains the physics part of it, one night while I was having a particularly interesting dream that showed me what was possible for love, I looked at my husband and I just knew that I wouldn't be with him. And I had no rational reason why not. He had checked all the boxes. And I had no idea where the information came from, but I just knew. So then I went on a little journey with, this is 15 years ago now, maybe 18 years ago with Dr. Bruce. This is 18 years ago with Dr. Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden and all those guys who are just masters at what they do around how biochemistry and beliefs and physics are all tied together. And basically, when it comes to physics, I started to understand that we are mostly made of metaphysical particles. And this is almost like a television that receives, your personality receives the frequencies of the information that is available to all people in the field. And so for me, I started to understand my physical body as a receptor, not just the vehicle through which I navigate life. And as I started to understand it that way, I realized that there was a lot more to me, and I was completely unaware of it. And so that was my foray into physics. I started to study the, metaphysics, applied physics, how it all works and how it applies to our everyday life, particularly with respect to love, because it's, we spend so much time, and we make connection so important as human beings, as it should be. So that's how it happened.
So there's the work that you do then involves the subtle energies that are involved that run through our brain and our bodies that may not be easily measurable in terms of scientific measures, but has a huge effect on how we gather information, how we
Sure.
get inspiration, and so how do you actually use that to transform people's lives?
Well, it's a great question. How we started to, I started to, when I say we, my team and I started to dive into the science of how one can, I'll give you an example. I remember one day I walked into a room, and it was an interview room, and they were giving me feedback on how I was doing while I was working at a big multinational company, and I knew instantly, somehow, I don't know how I knew, that I wouldn't be working there anymore within a couple of weeks. And it's not because they fired me, it's because I just knew I had to leave. There was another time where my husband, who was the president of a company, brought me to this big gala. And I didn't feel connected to anyone except for this one woman. And we spent all night having this amazing conversation. And I wondered what the science was behind that kind of a connection. How do we instinctually just know things? And I thought to myself, if I could know that, that would affect my relationships so deeply, because I would have such a sense of compassion. So what is that mechanism? And what we started to discover, based on some studies done with trees, believe it or not, in Germany and Russia, is that biophotons get sent out of all green living things, and they send and receive information back and forth. All plants and trees send this information back and forth that that is a form of communication. And in fact, you can even interpret it through some devices that I've been present for. It's very interesting. But what science is now discovering is that human beings also emanate biophotons. And those biophotons, just like with trees and plants, contain information. And that information, there are receptor sites on the outside of cells, and those receptor sites actually receive these biophoton packages of information. And so what we started to see, just by collecting evidence from various and sundry studies, is that our instincts, our instinct about people, come from the exchange of those biophotons. It's actually a scientifically explainable, although we're in the baby steps of being able to explain all of that. So how do we use that information? We use that information by teaching people how to interpret those instincts instead of living in their head, the confines of their head, and the confines of their history, which will only play out as the same relationship, because if you're constantly either trying to avoid your history, or if you're constantly in response to a history that you don't want, you're taking that history with you wherever you go. And so when you operate from instinct, you can actually send out different information from yourself by changing your mind and by visualizing what it is that you want. You start emanating different biophotons, and it actually becomes information that goes out into the world, and you're responded to differently. And so because people have receptor sites on their trillions of cells, and those receptor sites are picking up on the information that you're putting out. So as you change, of course, what you attract changes, both very specifically in any conversation, but also vastly in the kind of relationships that you attract. So that's what we work on. What we work on is the overall, let's say, meaning a different thing, but biosphere, if we want to call it something, it's like the biosphere, and what photonic, metaphysical information you're giving off, and putting yourself into a certain mindset that shifts your biology.
So how do you train people to do that?
It's a great question. We have a program called Get Out of Your Own Way, and as it pertains to relationships, it's called Get Out of Your Own Way to Expansive Creationships. Because instead of relationships actually being something where we're constantly trying to fix, or constantly trying to excavate the past, we focus on the portion of relationships that's more about creating upon creation. So really creating something that you've never had before. And so in that program, that's what we do. We focus on the vision forward. And what ends up coming up is the stuff that got in the way from the past. But the focus is always on emanating what's possible rather than trying to fix what's from the past.
Do you see that relationships are changing now in current time and our contemporary environment?
You must. Have you seen that? Yeah. It's really, I'll tell you guys a story. It's funny. We were doing a program one time, and we were all in a circle, and this woman, she's probably, 28 years old at the time. And there are a few other, 30-year-olds or so in this circle. And we started talking about relationships, all the 40 and 50-year-old people and 60-year-old people. And we were talking about relationships and defining them. And this 30-year-old just stood her ground, and she said, I don't want to talk about this anymore. It feels like there are rules, and there are boxes, and there are shoulds, and there are musts, and there are have tos. And she said, can we call it something else? So we invented a word. We invented the word. It's very scientific. You'll love it. Sniggly snoo. We just thought we're just going to invent a word that's fun, that doesn't have all the trappings of the shoulds, musts, and have tos. And so for us, what we're noticing in relationships is that people don't want to fit the traditional roles as much. They want to be able to create their relationships with freedom, with spaciousness, and room to be able to morph and follow their hearts, and be able to have a little bit more infrastructure that supports, their creativity and their ability to co-create together. So it's not like they want to get rid of infrastructure. It's almost as though a more robust infrastructure is necessary in order to have that level of freedom. So I find that, particularly the 25 to 35-year-olds, boy, oh boy, that's a real up-leveling for relationships, for humanity, I think. A lot more freedom there.
Well, I think you're saying that there's more emphasis on individuality now.
Mm-hmm.
And couples need to negotiate their individuality more.
In a big way. Yeah. I think but there needs to be, because there's so much yearning for that freedom and that individuality, the infrastructure to be able to provide that pathway is different than it was for many of us. The tools become almost even more important because that infrastructure becomes more important. And sometimes I find that when we're working with people at that age, the first thought is, oh my God, infrastructure, it sounds like it's confining me, when actually it sets you free.
Well, our way of saying that is that every couple has to define their own roles with each other. It's not given.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to do a lot more talking and a lot more partnering and creating what works for the uniqueness of the two of you.
Yeah, it's so true. So, yeah, and I find it's even more so in the new evolution of relationships, that it's even more important to do that. So, yeah, and the great thing is, you know, the young people, 30, 40, you know, they're doing a great job of communicating, actually. I think better than my generation. There's there's a little more freedom, fewer shoulds, musts, and have to. So I love it. I mean, I love 30-year-olds. I love them so much. I just love their sense of freedom.
Well, and you know, and the bottom line is fewer of them are getting married than previous generations. So
Right.
It's complicated. Can you say some of the tools you might, prefer to offer couples who are on this journey to define themselves as individuals as well as a couple?
Sure. Some of the tools that my husband and I use, and definitely our relationship would probably be put in the category of sniggly snoo.
So you remarried, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I had no idea. I definitely was not myself in my original marriage. I was following, I'm such a huge proponent of authenticity, because I just had no idea who I was in my first marriage at all. And so this marriage has been such a journey of discovery. I love it. I love the path. So some of the tools that we use, let me see some of my absolute favorites. One tool is we call a Mazatlan moment. And as you both probably recognize in relationships, one of the problems we find that really stops people from staying in their flow is that one or the other person doesn't feel heard. That there's a real sense that they're not being heard, they're not being listened to, their point is not being made. So this particular tool is based on, the prayer of St. Francis, and some of the wise words of St. Francis that say, it's, seek to understand instead of be understood. And so when someone declares a Mazatlan moment, we called it a Mazatlan moment because the first time we did it was in Mazatlan, Mexico. And so my husband and I were we were butting heads. And there was a lot of righteousness going on. I said, stop. Okay, we have to create a new way of doing this. We have to use our wisdom. This is about 10 years ago. This is at the beginning of our relationship. And he said, yeah, you're right. This isn't working. And I said, how about this? It seems like you have something to say, and it seems like it's in response to you're defending yourself because it feels like you think I'm attacking you. And he said, yep, and vice versa. And I said, okay, let's walk away. So we walked away. That's not the Mazatlan moment. I said, let's come back when we can both be neutral and we can own that we can be neutral. So we came back together when we were neutral, and we sort of discovered this little tool that we use. And I said, how about you declare a Mazatlan moment? He said, what's that? I said, why don't you explain to me what you were trying to say? And I'm going to listen with my heart instead of my head. And I just want to be able to acknowledge what it is that you're sharing and tell you that I understand and I hear it. So he shared, and I nodded, and I said, I understand. And what we recognized at the end of this, again, remembering that this is, years and years ago, he said, I realize that I'm being really righteous, and I realize that it's just this isn't even right now speaking. This is like me at 15 years old speaking. So in the Mazatlan moment, you get to name the age of the conversation that you're speaking. And so then I said, "Are you complete?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you want to share?" So that's the second part. So I got to share my Mazatlan moment. And he said, "I got it. I hear you. Understand what you're saying. Is there anything else?" And I said, "No." And then I said, I think the age of this conversation is like 9 years old. I'm stamping my feet. He said, "Yeah, it kind of feels that way." And there was nothing to do. There was nothing to heal. There was nothing to analyze. It's just hearing each other. Mm-hmm. So for me, that was a very powerful tool. And there are various versions of that out there, but and I'm sure you guys talk about a tool like that too. I'm positive, because being heard is such an important thing.
And what you're saying is so important, because
yeah,
all of us have the hurts that are not
right
present. There, we brought the past into the present, and then if you share how old you are, it's very helpful for you and your partner to know that this is not much to do with you, my partner. It has to do with me as a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
What it has to do with. And it's very important to do that. So now, are you also involved with healing those 9-year-old parts of ourselves that need to be healed?
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the things that we do that's quite interesting, that is sort of a twist, is that we do something called a future initiation. So what that means is, we can imagine, all of us has the capacity for imagination. So we can imagine a separate timeline that if we hadn't made the choices that we made or in the past, or if after having been inspired by oodles of other people talking about their relationship, you start to get an idea of what you envision for your life. And so what we do is a future activation that's based on some very specific questions first, so that the person's biochemistry can start to line up with a different reality. You can start to feel it in your cells. And so we do that first before we go in and look at some of those 9-year-old or 16-year-old conversations, such that the person is attuned to another possibility, so that their grip and their protective mechanisms that keep them grounded in the past are that grip is a lot looser, because they're already seeing something else as possible. And we go through an exercise of creating some very real steps. So the mind is already in a different direction. And so then we go back and look at the 16 and the 9-year-old, and it's interesting how much easier it is to transmute some of those patterns. Yeah.
Very nice.
So we do that, definitely.
Very nice.
And would you say that's what it means to stay in flow with your partner?
Well, to stay in flow.
Step out of the past and be in the moment?
Well, you know what's really interesting? It's easy for us to say that, right? I'm sure with all the work that you've done, and you're a couple, so you've been together a while, and the flow is a funny thing, because sometimes even arguments are in the flow. Sometimes having deep discussions are in the flow too. But one of the things that I've found, which is another tool, especially with children, and actually I do it with my husband all the time. And it has to do with that same flow. It's a phrase that the general manager of our company came up with. She started using it on her children, and they would throw a tantrum or they would have a big upset. And her response to them was, "I totally get that you would feel that way. I totally understand that. God, that must really suck to feel that way." And this for me, that's probably the biggest tool. That's the second tool I was going to mention that keeps us all in the flow. Because instead of getting caught up and taking things personally, which I think is one of the greatest detriments to a relationship, is taking things personally. That for me is what takes us out of that present moment where we can access those beautiful conversations, right? We start to react to something, and instead just having that phrase available, I totally get it. I hear you. I can't talk about it right now, but I totally get you.
So what I'm hearing is you teach empathy skills, and then your procedure where you ask specific questions about how you see yourself. Those are cognitive skills that you're looking to accomplish, so that you're really contributing to the cognitive and emotional development of the people that you're working with.
Yes, connecting to the cognitive development skills of people, but it's also connecting to a possible future that already has the mind in its creative process and available to possibilities to head a different direction. So when you open the mind to that degree, what happens is the grip on the past becomes less tight. And so the methodology, yes, cognitive skills, but that future initiation, that initiation of a different future where you're already creating solutions and you start writing them down, it's, for me, that even, it gives them the impetus to even learn the cognitive skills. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, you're creating an intention that solves the problem of now in the future.
Right.
Very nice.
Right. So, yeah.
I'd be interested to know more about how you craft those questions.
Yeah, it's from probably tens of thousands of people worth of experience, and the last 20 years of doing what we do, and looking at the research, etc. But be so happy to share. It's been a fascinating process for sure.
You have an idea about that methodology, but again, it's you have to your people need to be committed to
Yes.
the journey and to growing themselves.
Well, the funny thing is, the people that end up in our programs tend to have they tend to be stubborn. Except for lack of a way. Yeah, absolutely. They tend to be a little bit stubborn, which is why that methodology tends to work for them so well.
Yeah. So as you're describing your methodology, I'm thinking that the kind of work that Barbara and I do together, when we've written our book, The Marriage Map, Transforming Your Marriage from Ordeal to Adventure, it does.
I love that.
The individuals in a romantic relationship seeing a big picture of what's possible in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
When they have that big picture in front of them,
yes,
as a possibility,
yes,
and it does what you're describing. It allows them to go through the little upsets and to see, oh, there's a big picture of why this is all happening that's so much more important than the little things that are going on now.
exactly.
That perspective, and as you say, you can then work on the little things with the big picture there, and that's so important for people to understand. The big picture of romantic relationships is something that's way beyond being, quote, happy. Being happy is not the big picture. Being spiritually enlightened, growing into an experience of intense love that's very, very powerful,
and wisdom
and spiritual godly awareness. There's so many ways to describe it, but it's much bigger than just being, quote, happy, where you're not upsetting me and I'm not upsetting you. That is like not the goal.
No, that's the booby prize of all booby prizes, right? Like, here we are. We have the capacity to. I have to tell you guys that I just realized we've met before. I can't remember which convention I was speaking at or something, but I just realized that I've met you two before.
Oh,
so it just occurred now. We actually had a chat. So that idea that a relationship provides the opportunity to go down, I language it like this. It's like you're being given the opportunity to go on an adventure, the basis of which is, love, and the driving force will be your curiosity to see how much love you can emanate together. And then you get to dive down that wormhole. And in the process, it becomes this glorious excuse for self-discovery and discovery about the world and about life. And it certainly is scary to the old patterns, because inevitably they'll have to let go in order to go on an adventure, because by definition, an adventure is into the unknown. It must be. So
it is a transformational journey at best.
100%.
And
100%.
someone you love, you get amazing feedback that even a therapist can't give you.
Right? It's just, yeah. I find my husband's insight about me invaluable. Not that we spend the whole time in giving each other insight, because it's another trap you can fall into when you're in this world that we're in of awakening. And the trap can be that you end up being each other's coach, which, maybe 2% of the time you can do that, but the rest of the time it really is about that beautiful roadmap, as you were saying earlier, a beautiful adventure you get to go on. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Very nice. So, do you, so what, how do you, what's your, the lead into you helping couples? How do you come by the people who want your assistance?
People usually come to us, we do an awful lot of interviews, but usually they come to us because we've created something, we've termed it a brain bridge. And the brain bridge is a technology that we use to bridge sort of that expansive, all is possible right brain with that very sort of dogmatic, practical left brain, such that the right brain, where all is possible, then trains the left brain to let go a little bit. And so we offer up that tool in the area of, I think, family and relationships / love, in the topic of abundance. And the last one is on the topic of, I think, self-sabotage. It's so we offer up that tool, and people can go and get those 3, basically they're mini seminars that provide the brain activations, provide the training to be able to get your mind to let go of old thinking and step into a deeper truth.
Is that available online?
That's something, people can go. Do you want me to give the link for that? It's it's thewideawakening.com /3 days. Because it's basically 20 minutes for each, and it takes 20 minutes each to do those. And then what we're intending to do with those is to change the biochemistry so that the photons that you give off are different. Therefore, your magnetics are different. Therefore, what occurs in your life is different. So with respect to love and relationships, there's far more fluidity because you changed the default way you be.
Very nice. So that sounds lovely. That sounds very nice.
It's fun.
That people can go online and get that tool and start that process. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a fun thing to be able to offer people. We get great feedback.
And who is your perfect student or individual? What's your client?
I think our perfect client they're people that have a sense of urgency inside, that there's something more to life, but they don't know how to get there. So people that really know that fulfillment is available. They've seen it in other people. They've watched around them. And they have a sense that there's an expression of themselves that they haven't fulfilled upon. And so our job at the Wide Awakening is really to assist them to align with the reason why they were born. And again, shift the biochemistry so the magnetics are different, more authentic expression, and people can feel it. I mean, people can feel whether you're in alignment or not, and they can feel it because we're exchanging information all the time. So that's the level that we work on, and it's really those people that already have that instinct that there's something more, they just don't know how to get there.
Oh, very nice. Well, excellent. And so if people want to contact you, one, they go to your website. What is your website?
thewideawakening.com /3 days, and that way they'll really get to know what we're up to.
Very nice. Excellent. Excellent. Well, this is lovely to spend time talking with you, and we look forward perhaps to meeting again and interacting more with your processes. And we love supporting our followers with things that they can do that bring them more growth and development and
Wonderful.
love in their life. So it's a delight to talk with you.
Well, it feels like you guys are the perfect people to bring that to people.
Yes, we have common purpose. We want people to grow in partnership and experience true love and self-development at the same time.
Yeah, which seems like a perfect expression of all that love that I can feel coming from over there.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to meet with you and chat with you.
Lovely to connect with you as well. Thank you for having me.
All right. You take care now.
You too.
Bye now.
Thank you for watching the Falling in Love Forever show with Doctors Barbara and Michael Grossman. Join us next week for another informative discussion to help you keep your love alive. Be sure to visit us at themarriagemap.com or find out about our relationship classes at fallinginloveforever.com.